We're here with Carrie Cunningham today, and the topic du jour is B2B buyer experience. Carrie, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Pleased to be here.
You got it. So, Carrie, you've been an analyst and a researcher and a thought leader in the B2B marketing and demand area for, I think, over a decade now.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about sort of what you're doing over at 6 Sense and what your kind of core focus is right now.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I've been an analyst. I came from Sears Decisions and Forrester before 6 Sense. I really have the same job here, slightly better funded. So my job is to try to understand what's important to our audience, which is B2B marketers, primarily, and sellers. And so I do a lot of primary research, a lot of writing based on that research, and a lot of speaking and those kinds of things as well. I also talk to 150 or so marketers a year, one-on-one, and so that's probably as important a source of understanding about what's going on in the world as anything. But then lots of digging into the data as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's probably one of the things I enjoy most about being a founder of a MarTech company is I get to talk to tons of marketers in the C-suite, and a day doesn't go by that I don't learn something that I didn't know before.
Yeah.
Look, I had a hard time even figuring out where to begin. But let's jump in. So I think we can all agree that we're probably feeling more optimistic this year about the buying environment. That might not be saying too much given the period we're coming off of, but I think everyone's feeling optimistic from a variety of, macro and microeconomic, factors. Mm-hmm. I think Gen AI, right, represents a platform shift, right? That's pretty significant to say the least. And it's budgeting season, right? So all the marketers out there are kind of thinking about a lot of things maybe that they haven't thought about in some time. And I'd love to talk about this report that you published. And by the way, for listeners out there, if you haven't seen this report, go Google Carrie Cunningham B2B Buyer Experience Report right now. Download it. It's extraordinary. It has a veritable gold mine of data, and Carrie's done the hard work. The data collection, the regression analyses, the inferential statistics, and the clustering and segmentation. Okay, I've exhausted my statistical knowledge at this point.
You nailed them all.
Yeah, that's statistics 101 from college. So look, you cover a lot of in this report. And the first thing I did, right, I do this a lot with research reports. We talked about this, Carrie, is I feed it into my favorite models, right? I fed it into the usual suspects, ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude. And it came back with, as you would guess, lots of different things, but there were some patterns. And there were also some things that I read through the report. And like I said before, kudos to your design team. They did a wonderful job with this report. I really encourage everyone to download the report and read it, and don't just stuff it into an LLM. It's worth reading. But one of the thematic, I think, stats that resonated across this report, and you kind of talk about it throughout, are B2B buyers are already 70% through their purchasing process before they even engage with a seller. Like we call this the rise of the anonymous buyer. We talk about this a lot at Qualified, but how can you sort of explain this phenomenon? Because when you see that statistic, you're kind of like, whoa, that's pretty powerful. Like, how should marketers think about this?
One of the ways I think marketers should think about this is really simple. Self-reflection. Think about what it looks like when you are in market for something. Do you rush out and say, giving a sales rep, need to talk to a sales rep, I want to think about this buying in this category of solution? No, you don't. You do a lot of research. You probably start, unless it's a brand new category, you probably start with an idea of who you would like to buy to begin with, right? If you're going out to buy marketing automation or some other kind of tool that you have, the players already. The other people inside your organization that are going to have to cooperate with you to get what you want, your buying group, they probably already have some ideas of who the players are. In fact, in our research, they know 75% of the players already. They're on day one of the shortlist. So you're going out on this journey. Your buyers are going out on this journey. You've done that as a marketer many times. Just think about what that's like. And then think about what you do And what I think you'll find is that you are building your go-to-market strategies for a world that does not exist. You're building them for a world that you don't participate in. So you expect that your buyers walk into the market and they're completely naive and know nothing about the vendors, and they've got to come look at your white paper. They've got to come get introduced to what you do and who you are. And just none of that's true. They know who you are. They've been around the block. They've got their short list pretty well filled, which is why the first 70% of that buying journey is not about even learning about the category and learning about the competitors. They already kind of know that. It's updating that information on the category and the competitor from the last time they were in a buying cycle for this. And then it's trying to defend what they want to buy against the other opinions inside their organization. Right? So if they've got 4, 5, 6 other people that they've got to convince that I want to buy Qualified, I want to buy 6 Sense, I've got to make that case internally. And as it turns out, it looks like no matter how long the ultimate buying cycle is, that takes about, it takes about 2/3 of what that total buying process is going to be, about twice as long as it takes to validate that decision once it's done. So when we say 70% of the purchasing process is done before they engage sellers, that includes deciding who they want to buy, right? And that's I think the thing that marketers really have to, and sellers have to really come to grips with, is your buyers have already decided. Like if you're talking to them, they have already decided whether you're on the top of the list or not.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, it makes so much sense when you think about it. I mean, everything in marketing is digital for the most part. I mean, obviously we do some things that are offline, but everything is digital. Everything is trackable. And marketers have been working on content and one of the great things about marketing for us, right, for 6 Sense and Qualified, is the marketing community is fantastic, right? You can go out, you can ask your community, and you can engage with forums, and you can read reviews, and you can read white papers, and you can go to the website and understand sort of how something works and watch videos. And, you do all these things, right? And you probably formulate relatively quickly sort of like where a set of vendors stacks up and how well they might be a fit for you. And so, the fact that you might already kind of have a short list makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah.
Another stat that you publish, right, which is sort of on par with this, is that buyers are the ones that initiate contact.
Yeah.
80%. When you see something that says 80% of the time, that's a pretty overwhelmingly, that's stat sig, right? Almost. But how should marketers think about the ones that, like, the sellers are the ones that are being contacted? There's all this motion around outbound, right? And look, everyone's going to do outbound. Outbound is something you're going to do. It's really hard. It's a discipline. There's no ceiling on it. You're hearing a lot about outbound AI. We call them sort of BDRs, but they're, a lot of people started using SDRs this sort of, I think it's too broad at this point, but most of the time it's the buyers that are initiating contact.
Yeah. And so, there's some really interesting nuance there, but also, like, this is at the heart of why I call this a radical new view of how buying and selling works, because I think it is radical. Like, the whole enterprise of B2B demand gen is based on the idea that I can do things digitally that cause people to come and identify themselves to us so that I can sick a team of people on them who can go cause those people to interact with me and then become prospects at some rate that is acceptable to me financially, that's going to work. What the data says is that buyers 80+% of the time, as you said, they say they initiate action. And so we, subsequent to this, that research, we did another little survey and said, so were you getting phone calls and emails from BDRs, sales reps prior to the time you decided to engage? The answer was yes, 75% of the time. So they are just ignoring those overtures until they are ready. And so we said 80% say that they initiate. That leaves about 20% who say that they didn't, that they responded to sellers. And we looked at when that happens. Does that happen earlier in the buying process? Right. So we said earlier, buyers don't engage until 70%. That's because 80% of the time, they're the ones initiating it. But when you look at that 20% who aren't initiating, who are just responding, it happens at the same time or later. It's not earlier. And so what does that tell you? Well, that tells you it just doesn't matter if you're calling or emailing them. It makes no difference in when they're going to engage with you. It's not a factor, right? And yet the whole enterprise of lead gen and lead follow-up and BDRs and all of that is based on the idea that we can't cause that to happen. And what buyers say is, no, you can't. No, I'll do it when I'm ready. That's it.
Yeah. One of the things we talk about a lot, there's different cultures inside of every company, right? And I work quite a bit with our product team, and my march is always like, build the best in class product. Build a product that's better than anyone else in market, and people will come. And of course, the marketers are like, yeah, that's not how it works. We have to go out and we have to create awareness and distribution, and we have to create demand. So all these things, of course, work together. One of the things you talk a lot about is B2B buyers are very selective about when, right? You guys talk about like when somebody engages, and just like you said, right? Like you can do all the outbounding, but you have to hit them at the right time, right? So it's like right buyer, right time, right message. Obviously, like everyone talks about this, but it's hard. It's not an exact science, right? So what are the tactics that you have found effective for like generating awareness and nurturing interest without like seeming like you're a spam cannon, which, obviously we're seeing a lot of this now that LLMs can write emails and people are trying automating. I always used to say like sequences were like outbound with a machine gun. I think with LLMs now, outbound is becoming like a laser beam. But like, what tactics are important to think about for like really like generating awareness and nurturing interest without being pushy and having poor timing?
So maybe I'll kind of raise it up one level and introduce an idea that I think is a really good one. Not my idea. This is from Lisa Cole at 2X. A lot of folks in B2B marketing know Lisa. She had this idea of marketing creating gravity around your brand. So think of all of the audience that you ultimately like to sell to, your ICP and all of that. That your job in marketing is to create gravity. It's to create a force that keeps your audience revolving around your brand. They're mostly not in market. 95% of the accounts that you could sell to are not in market at any given time, but they need to be in some level attracted to your brand and engaging at some level all the time, so that when they go out into market, you're on that short list. And when they are in market, that you're a source that they trust and that they consume from and are influenced by. And so how exactly you do that, the channels that you use, the approaches that you use, I think could vary a lot. But the principle that you have to keep in mind is it cannot be about you as the vendor. What you have to do is understand your audience, how your audience works, what problems they're trying to solve every day, not just specific to your solution necessarily, but what are the kind of issues that the people that you sell to are facing that you could provide some value in. And I'll give an example. So 6 Sense sponsors this thing called CMO Coffee Talk, where like 1,000 CMOs belong to this thing. We don't do any pitching. We don't run the thing, but we sponsor it. And 1,000 of the people who buy 6 Sense or could attend this thing every week and get community from it. They get ideas. They get connected with their audience. It has nothing to do specifically with what 6 Sense does, but it's providing value. It's creating gravity around the 6 Sense brand all the time. My entire job is that. So, I talk to a lot of customers and prospects, but mostly what I'm doing is I'm out spreading the word about how things ought to be and what's the research and all of that. So I think for every organization, you need to think a little more long-term about how you serve the audience that you want to be selling to. You don't have to think of it purely in like in terms of being a charity or something like that. It's really, look, I participate in this community. I want to be able to make a living in this community as a company. How do I how do I show up in this community? What kind of value do I provide in helping the practitioners that I want to sell to do their jobs well and be effective in their careers? And I think if you approach it that way, you'll probably start doing some of the right things. When it comes to like what channels to use and those kinds of things, I think it doesn't really matter. Like our research is showing that buyers do more or less everything that we provide to them. You know, whatever channels we're in, the buyers come check it out. Their opinions about them are, you know, like it's our report on what buyers like to do during their journey is the most boring thing ever. It just says, look, we'll do all the stuff that you have, and they all think it's okay. They really love personal interactions. Curiously, they don't want to have them until 70% through their journey, right? But once they're ready, they think they're great. So, you know, if that answers the question directly enough, but that's kind of how I'm thinking about that these days.
Yeah, look, I think that you've done an extraordinary job of creating community. HubSpot kind of created this inbound movement, right, around creating all of this content and creating a lot of inbound links to your website, and they kind of founded that movement. But to be honest, I really have switched. We're a big part of. We love your community. Our CMO talks about Coffee Talk all the time. Latany's done an extraordinary job. You have done a great job. I go to Sixth Sense now because you definitely have created a community that's not about you. It's about sort of getting all the people in a room talking about sort of what they're experiencing, what tactics and programs they're thinking about. So you guys have done a great job. And one of the things you guys started talking a lot about, and I've also sort of admired your M&A strategy. I saw you guys kind of bought, you bought a contact database with Slentel. You bought some email infrastructure. You've sort of started working at the contact level. You have, of course, like industry leading intent data, and you've kind of put all this together in a way that kind of like enables customers to go after their buying team, right? So like you said earlier in the conversation, right? It's not one person who buys software in B2B. It's a select set of personas that all have to do their research, talk to each other, go through a process, and decide that this is the purchase they want to make. So buying teams, you lay out that, getting to buying teams and buying committees is really important. Like how can marketers like really be more scientific about engaging all the different personas that they're trying to get to within a buying group or a buying team?
So I think first, I've been recommending this since back at Serious Decisions. Like you need to go look at your lead data, the data from the people who engage with you on your website. And what you'll see is that you already are engaging buying groups. That's happening all the time. That when you have a deal that gets the pipeline, you will have had, depending upon your solution, 4, 5, 6, a dozen people from a prospect organization on your website engaging with your content already. That's happening today. Now, if you just have marketing automation and Salesforce automation, and those are the tools that you rely on to see those prospects, you are not seeing it in real time and you're not responding to it. It will change your life once you see that you have already been engaging many, many people from these organizations. And one, you're never getting credit for that. And two, it is not causing the right actions inside your organization. So one, just go look at that data. It's there. And when you start analyzing that data and you see, one, who are the people who are engaging with me already by persona, by title, etc., and what's the content that they're looking at? We've got all kinds of anonymous people on your website all the time. What are they looking at? Right? What you can see when you look at it generally is that those people will cluster into groups. Like there are people who are interested in this aspect of your solution, people who are interested in this aspect of how you talk about it. So part of it is just, I think the most important part is looking at what's already there, because that's what's going to convince other people in your organization that this isn't just some guy on LinkedIn or whatever who's talking about this, but this is what's happening already today. You've already got content probably for a couple of buyer personas, or at least your content kind of comprehends that I've got to make arguments for a couple of different, types of buyers. That I think needs to become more robust. There's some great research from the B2B Institute about how buying groups make decisions. And one of the things that they talk about is that you've got the primary folks that you talk to all the time, that kind of champions, ultimate decision makers for your solution. But then there's this other group of people that really have a different set of criteria. And together, what's going to happen is, like, you may have the most exciting, most innovative, cutting edge solution, but your finance guy doesn't care about that nearly as much as you do. What they want is something that's not going to suck and something from a company that's not going to go away, right? And that they're not going to get charged too much, right? So any decision that's going to get made is going to get brought back to kind of a middle ground, right? If you're the safest, there's people who are going to drag it a little toward the edge. If you're the most innovative, it's going to drag it there. So do you have content that can help your critical buyer personas make the arguments they need to make internally to get your solution over the line? Right. So if you're that cutting edge solution, can you, and this is true with a lot of SaaS companies, do you have content that is going to help them make the case internally with the IT guy, with the finance guy, to get your solution over the line? And if you don't, you need to fix that. That's something that's very much on my mind today with the conversations that I've been having with marketers is we really have not paid attention to the fact that what's happening internally in your buyers is this debate about what they should do and what they can do. Your buyer may love you, and it won't matter if they can't get you over the line with the finance guys and the project guys and all of that. So to me, that's the biggest gap right now. But then I think the big process is go look and try to understand what are your prospects looking at when you're on your website, and also, use third-party intent to understand what they're looking for and trying to find, but not necessarily finding.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's so much data, like we talked about. Everything's trackable, everything's digital. That yields a lot of data. It always surprises me that a lot of people have a hard time figuring out what data they should use and when, and then obviously, is it reliable, right? That's obviously the other big question. And, this whole buying committee oftentimes involves people that are cross-functional and they have different values, right? At the end of the day. And that's something we think about a lot. There's probably a lot of people listening here. If you're at a big company, I worked at Salesforce for a while, right? We had industry teams, we had different geos, we had people in APAC and EMEA, and we had big teams that were very focused. And these are very different regions with different types of buying behavior. And I really liked how you broke out a lot of your findings into like different segments and industries and geos. Like, there's probably a lot of people here who sell into different industries and geographies, but don't have like domiciles set up to actually really attack these things. How should marketing strategies adjust to sort of like take into account these different sort of behaviors across different geos and industries?
Yeah. So, I think first things I would say is that what's different about buying journeys across industries and segments, across geographies, is mostly nuance. And that's good. Like, US, Europe, the way they buy, very similar. The fact that buyers don't engage until 70%, all of that's true everywhere in the world in virtually every segment. So that's great. But if you're an APAC, your buyer is going to evaluate one more vendor reliably, one more than they would be evaluating same kind of company in Europe or United States. And you might think, well, so what? Well, so what is adding one more vendor to an evaluation list adds 2 months to the evaluation process, and revenue delayed is revenue lost. So if you're going into market in APAC, you have to expect that that's going to take longer in those buying journeys. It's going to involve more people within that buying group. And so your planning has to account for that. There are some interesting nuances by industry. So if we look at, for instance, if you sell into a manufacturing industry, that buying process is going to be simpler and take a lot less time. They're not going to evaluate as many vendors. If you're not on that short list on day one, you're not going to be evaluated. It's kind of quick, fast, much shorter, fewer people involved. Finance takes a little longer, and they involve more people. So there are these important nuances that you should be aware of. I think they particularly impact your planning. They for the overall how do buyers buy, it looks the same, but like when the sales cycles, the buying cycles get lengthened or shortened, that really can impact planning a lot. The last thing I would say there is that for you, what you really need to do, especially if you're a marketer, is talk to a lot of your prospects and customers. I think this is an area that I think is vastly underserved in B2B, and I think particularly in SaaS. We think we know our customers because we see them at shows twice a year. Get your ass out there and talk to them a lot more. It will keep you grounded.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, time kills deals. We always talk about a lead as like an ice cream cone. It melts, right? So, one of the things I saw in your data is, APAC was definitely the outlier in many of these data points. I was kind of curious, Carrie, like when you do this research, and you kind of see, I think you talked to 2,500 companies or something like that, like significant number of companies. Was there anything that you sort of like when you saw sort of when all the data was in and you started to see sort of the semblance of this thing come together?
Yeah.
Was there something that you were like, oh, wow, this is astonishing. This is something I need to start, because I do appreciate that you have a nice feed on LinkedIn that kind of publishes interesting data points from your study. Was there something that kind of blew your hair back?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. Like I would have been, so our hypotheses were all supported. Like I thought that most of the buying process would occur before talking to sellers, and we thought that buyers probably knew which vendors they liked and all of those things. But the extent to which those things are true absolutely blew me away. I would say the single most important thing for people to understand right now is the one I talked about earlier. Buyers engage at 70% plus or minus a couple of points, and you cannot change that. Now, that's for 80% of buying processes. The other 20% where buyers say, I was engaging with a seller before we decided, that is, I think, where your AEs have existing relationships with the decision makers inside the companies you're trying to sell to. And that's where you get to play outside the rules. And so I think, this makes me feel like, your sales reps are really important, because like if you can goose that 20% to 25 in your organization by being really great at developing relationships with accounts, it's going to make a huge difference in how you sell. All right. But for everything else, it's marketing. It's marketing and your reputation in the marketplace. So yes, for one, I've probably given you 5 already in the short little thing, but they all kind of go together. That the vast majority of decisions are being made without talking to sellers first, and you can't get there. You can't just muscle your way into those buying processes by calling and emailing a billion times. That will not solve the problem for you. You have to engage with your buyers the way that they want to be engaged with. They want value from you, and if they're not going to get it, they're not going to put you on the top of the short list before they talk to you. And that to me, just the magnitude of those numbers is really what blows me away.
Carrie, I could talk to you all day about this stuff. Again, if you haven't seen Carrie's report, you should go get it now. It's not only beautifully designed and laid out, but there's a lot of amazing data in there. So, Carrie, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Fun conversation. Appreciate it.